On episode 279 of the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast, we meet Ian Ryan, the host of the Fearless and Healthy podcast. You can find the full show notes at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com/279. Have you decided you're ready to make a change? To reclaim your health and fitness? The 40 Plus Fitness Podcast is here for you. I'm your host, Alan Meisner. I'm an NSAM certified personal trainer with a specialization in corrective exercise and fitness nutrition. Let me be your coach as you find your way on your health and fitness journey. All right, let's go. Hello, and welcome to the 40 Plus Fitness Podcast. I am so glad you're here. I want to apologize now for a couple episodes you're going to hear coming up in a couple weeks. I have come down with a head cold. I was traveling to Washington, D.C., getting on an airplane, lots of people. You know the drill. Kind of got a head cold. I've been dealing with it for a few days now. And I do record the episodes a couple of weeks in advance, so you're gonna probably hear this little nasally me for a couple of weeks here and there on the intros and then on some of the episodes. And I do apologize for that. I am doing what's necessary to take care of myself, getting plenty of fluids, and getting plenty of rest. But at the same time, it doesn't help the voice. I'm pretty excited about our guest today. Ian started podcasting around the same time I did. And if you ever try to get into the podcasting space, there's these folks that'll have little schools or whatnot, little groups that they'll host, and you can pay into them. And I had paid into one that I thought would be pretty good to teach me the basics and get me going well. And Ian was also one of the podcasters that came into that group. So I was aware of his podcast back then, kind of kept track of him there, lost track of him for a little while, but both of us have been podcasting for about the same amount of time. He's got a very interesting story, and the way he kind of overcame some things in his life, I think, is a valuable lesson for just about all of us to go back and listen to and kind of get into our minds about what we're capable about our own resilience, about the way that we cope with things, and how we choose to use that to either better ourselves or not. So I am interested to introduce you to Ryan and his story, but with no further ado, here's Ian Ryan. So Ian, welcome to 40 Plus Fitness.
Alan, I'm excited for this. Thank you so much for having me.
I am too. You know, the funny thing was we both launched our podcasts right about the same time, and we were both actually a part of the same kind of training group. It was kind of high end, I would call, for most of the podcasting training that you could get out there. So it was kind of interesting to follow your path, and the two of us kind of hit the new and noteworthy, which at the time was kind of a boost of the ego, for lack of anything else, because it really didn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. It was just, yeah, you're new, okay, great, here you go, you're on the list. Smile and be happy about it. But we were both up there on that new and noteworthy. So I was kind of following your path early on, and just interested in what you were doing. Kind of separated for a while, and we got reintroduced by a mutual friend, and I'm glad he did, because I've come back and listened to a few of your episodes. It's been a while, and really interested in your story. You've really kind of opened that up, and it's just, I think some of the lessons that you've gone through, even at, just in what I would call an early age, you have some life lessons that are well worth sharing, and I'm happy to have this opportunity to talk to you today.
Well, Alan, I'm excited to be here and talk about my story. And it is crazy looking back. We both launched, I guess, about 2 years ago. It's been such a journey, and you're absolutely right. The new and noteworthy, it's a nice little ego boost there initially, but then you realize it really doesn't mean much. So I'm definitely on the same page with that, and look forward to the show today.
So, as I kind of got into your story, I think a lot of us, as we go through our lives, we're gonna face some heartache. We're gonna face some tough times, and it's kind of one of those inevitable. I'm not even going to do the word right. Inevitabilities where basically you're going to lose people. Things are going to change in your life. We're all going to kind of go through that, and I think as I get older, just recognizing, okay, I have friends that range from 85 years old to my age, and maybe even a little bit younger, but I'm going to lose friends. I'm going to lose family, and I'm going to lose people around me.
And I love your mindset as the kind of the way, and that's what I want to get into your story a little bit today, of that mindset change and kind of where that drove you and kind of how you look back at that and use that as kind of fuel to go forward.
For sure. Well, I'll give the short summary of the backstory and then get into that lesson and that adversity that I felt pretty strongly in January 2015. Leading up to that time, I had been in the fitness industry, worked in the big box gym, and then had my own personal training company. And, I was feeling like something was missing from my life a little bit, somewhat you could call a lack of fulfillment. In January, I remember Alan sitting in a Starbucks. I was reading a book and I got a call from my father, and he said, I think it's happened. He goes, and I kind of knew what he was talking about because my brother had been battling drug addiction for a while. And I had always feared getting that call, but I can't say that it was unexpected. And I remember driving over to my father's house, our childhood home, and, ambulances are out front and my mom and dad are inside crying hysterically. And my brother had actually passed away from a drug overdose. And it was horrifying. It was, I was sick to my stomach. It was such a tough thing to go through. More so than for me, Alan, really just seeing my mom and, my dad, they just lost a son. And through that experience, obviously, it took me a while to heal. But after that, I really started asking myself some of those big life questions. I felt sorry for myself for a little bit in the beginning stages. And then I said, you know what, I can go one of two ways where I'm at right now. I can either use this adversity to fuel me and to make other people's lives better. And hopefully people can learn from my story and create something out of their lives. Or, I can let it really derail me. And it's funny, through that, I launched a digital magazine where I was trying to figure out why the hell my brother was addicted to drugs, just because I didn't really understand addiction. So that was like that first project that I launched immediately afterwards. And eventually it led me, which I'm sure we'll get into, moving out to San Diego, starting my podcast, and really just feeling like I needed to share my story and help people embrace where they were, get over the struggles that we all go through as human beings and really make something out of their life. So I'm sure we'll get into it, but that's kind of the story in a nutshell and where my podcast and my business really evolved from.
Well, now you say your brother, but there's more to the story. You didn't just lose your brother around that period of time. You had a lot more loss.
Absolutely. I did. So my brother was obviously the blood, and that hit me the hardest. But the reality is my grandmother actually lost her life 3 weeks after my brother did. And about 3 weeks prior to my brother passing away, I lost my college roommate from a heroin overdose. It was in the area where we grew up. There was a lot of heroin addiction. Opiates kind of led the way and fueled that. And then a lot of people kind of got into heroin. And I just remember that this 90-day period of my life, I had never felt so low. I had felt like so much of my life had been stripped away from me. Now, my grandmother died she lived until she was 85 years old, and she lived a full life, but it was everything hit me at once. And I just remember really going to a place that I don't like to revisit that often, but now I'm willing to talk about it because I know there's a lot of people that are in similar positions and deal with things in their life. And, I truly believe, Alan, we have to make a decision. And sometimes those decisions have to be made during those low points, during that adversity. And we can often use it as a catalyst and a spark to step into a higher calling or a bigger vision. And people talk a lot about hitting rock bottom, whether that be from drugs, getting laid off from a job. For me, it was a lot of personal loss, and it was one thing after the other. But like I kind of touched on before, it was a huge catalyst for change in my life and really realizing that nothing in life is guaranteed. Nothing's going to be handed to me, and it's going to be up to me to make something out of it.
A lot of, I guess, the psychology of grief out there kind of says you go through these 5 stages. And I think pretty much every time I've heard the 5 stages, it almost seems like, okay, well, you go into a dark place and then you work your way back out to, I guess for a lack of a better word, back to level, back to where you were. But you kind of took it past that. And can you kind of talk about your grieving stages and kind of how you found yourself literally using that more like a springboard than just a get back to even.
Absolutely. I would say that the first phase for me was what most people feel like with loss or, when they're grieving is depression. And I definitely felt some of that. I'm not going to sit here and just say, oh my God, I woke up the next day and I was like, ready to do great or do different things in my life. But for me, I went through that depression stage, but it didn't last that long for me. From there, I kind of went into why me. So it was almost like feeling sorry for myself. But once again, that didn't last long either. And then immediately after that, I said, I got to do something about this. I got to create some change. And I guess because it was drug related and I had seen so many different people that were close to me struggle with drug addiction where I lived. And then I saw, like I mentioned, my good friend pass away and then my brother. I said, I want to not obviously put a stop to it, but really do something in the community around people that were struggling from drugs. So I launched this magazine to figure that out. And through that experience, I started helping people. And I started to feel what that felt like, to really step out into the community and do good and try some of these things. And from there, I used that project almost as a springboard to move me out to San Diego and really, launch my podcast. And it was really, I would say that experience helped me step into more fears in my life. I had realized that I had been living a lot of my life in my comfort zone. And that I wasn't really getting to where I wanted to go because I was playing it really, really safe. And I used that story and I used that lesson, I guess the experience from my brother, and I realized how quickly life can be snatched away from you. I mean, losing him at 25, he had so many dreams, aspirations, and things that he wanted to do from his life. And I just said, man, if I don't get moving and if I don't start doing these things, what's going to happen? So I think you go through those stages. And Alan, let me be clear that I think it's different for everyone. Some people stay in that depression and that feeling sorry for themselves stage for a while. And I'm not here to judge because everyone grieves differently. For me, I kind of switched through the phases pretty quickly and got into the stage of let me do something about this. Let me really make a difference, whatever that may be. I don't have to have it all figured out right now, but as long as I take those steps, it'll kind of come together. And that's where it's led me today. There's been a lot of ups and downs, but definitely a lot of good that's come out of the experience.
Yeah, I think, not that mine's similar exactly, but as I've kind of gone through and lost family members to cancer or dementia or whatnot, and in a sense lost myself for a number of years, kind of that process of saying I'm not going to say I have all the answers because I think it is a unique individual perspective for everybody kind of going through that. But I would dare say I kind of went through my own grieving process for my own health before I actually recognized that, I actually had the power to do something about it and to kind of step up and be exceptional. But beyond just doing it for myself, saying, if I share this with folks, and just be one person. If one person benefited from the fact that I took the time to do a podcast, that's a win. And I started my podcast with the kind of the expectation that if I can help one person, it was worth all the effort in the world to put this all together. And fortunately, the feedback I'm getting is I've done more than that, but I'm not done. I'm going to keep doing it.
I think that's a great point to make. And during those initial projects, having people reach out and let me know that my message, the content that I was putting out them was helping them get out of tough times, and really help them gain confidence in themselves. That was a huge thing for me. And you touched on something great, Alan, that I'll leave it here. Oftentimes we get caught up in numbers and, we don't think we're doing enough. But if we can just put our focus on the few people that we may be helping, it changes everything. And that was really the mindset that I tried to come from when I launched my podcast and I was going through that struggle. I said, if I can just help one person that was either going through something similar to what my brother was going through or was in a depressed state or was really struggling with their health and just put all my energy into helping and serving that person that wanted to listen to me, well, then that was going to be enough. And that really helped because from there it kind of snowballed naturally, and I was able to kind of help more people. And it seems like obviously your story is different, but you have a very similar mindset when it comes to that.
Yeah. Now you did something that I think for a lot of people would be terrifying. Your podcast is called Fearless and Healthy, but you could have easily called it Terrifying and Healthy, because I mean, you literally sat there and not just said, okay, I'm going to start this magazine or I'm going to do this thing. You went ahead and said, I'm pretty much, and it's kind of also your moniker on your logo is, I'm pretty much going to go out on the tightrope without a net and move myself across the country with a one-way ticket, and I'm going to do this thing. So can you kind of talk about the mindset that it takes to kind of make a decision like that and then pretty much burn all the boats, so you're out there and doing it. Can you just kind of talk about the mindset and how you approach that?
Absolutely. Well, I think a lot of people wait for the perfect time in life to do something. And that was me for a while. I mean, yeah, I had launched my own business back in DC, but to tell you the truth, I always had a calling to move out to the West Coast and travel more, in my late 20s. And I just didn't do it because I was like, well, what happens if I go out to San Diego and it doesn't work out? I'd be a failure. Everything would fall apart. Really that incident when I was going through that adversity, it made me look at situations differently. But I realized, where I was, the environment that I was in, it wasn't serving me to really step into my full potential. At least that was my opinion at the time. And I still believe it to be very true. Everyone where I grew up from, they were doing things their way, but it was a lifestyle and it was a way of living that did not seem congruent for what I wanted to do in my life. And I knew that I was going to have to change my environment, make other connections, and be around like-minded people that were going to encourage me to pursue my dreams and pursue this vision that I had for myself. So I knew I was going to have to get out of Maryland, Alan. And I said, San Diego was a hotbed for that. I truly believe that our environment really helps with our state of mind and can inspire us to do things. So I said, I'm going to go out on a limb and move out there. And instead of what was constantly putting my energy on what could go wrong, I flipped that into what could go right. And it's crazy, I got out here and now looking back, all the things that I made up in my head, they were all stories. I constantly was telling myself this story, this worst case scenario thing. And in reality, yeah, I moved across the country. Sure, that might be a terrifying thing for some people, but is it really? I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? I'd have to go home completely broke and start over at 30 or at 31 at the time. I mean, it really wasn't that catastrophic of a situation, but I think some people, they think it is. I remember getting messages about, hey, Ian, I mean, did you really just move out there? I mean, you really just stopped your business and decided to move out to San Diego? And I guess that seems a little weird for some people. But now looking back, it was the healthiest and the best thing that I have ever done for myself. And, a lot of times now when I look at situations and I look about how to move forward, there's always some type of fear that's standing in the way. And I analyze that fear a little bit more and I say, is this just a story that I'm creating, or is this something that is seriously dangerous and could have really negative consequences in my life? And we look at things differently, really analyze what those fears are and what those roadblocks are that are standing in the way. More times than not, we realize that we make up a lot of it.
Yeah. So you touched on three key things that I really want to kind of go back and really dig into, because I think they're really important. Is I think the first thing you brought up was sort of a self-awareness that the environment you were in, the things that were going on around you, really weren't conducive to you being the best you.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that was such a key thing. I mean, I had amazing friends and I had amazing family back home, but I was really lacking to find that entrepreneurial community, the like-minded connections that I wanted to. And how I knew this is, I was listening to podcasts, I was tearing through shows like Smart Passive Income and, Entrepreneur on Fire. And when I talked to people about this back home, they'd look at me like I was crazy. Like, what are you talking about? Podcasting, whatnot. And I had a really hard time cultivating those relationships. Now, I could have done a better job of it, but I found myself, going to the library and just being in this depressed state. And then you mix that with losing a family member. And I just knew that it was time for a change. And I just felt this pull and this tug on me constantly. And I knew intuitively that I was going to have to make a big move. And I think that that's, really important for people to think about is like, ask yourself, is the environment that you're in serving the higher version of yourself? Are the people that you're hanging out with, the place that you live? Obviously, some people's situations are different than me. At the time, I don't have kids, I'm not married, so it was easier for me to pick up and go. But I think we got to ask ourselves those questions, because for us to be set up for success, I believe environment is one of the most critical pieces of that.
Okay. And that leads me to my second piece of this is that you recognize that when you did arrive in San Diego, that you needed some level of accountability. So the people that you were going to surround yourself with were going to be those kind of people that were going to hold you accountable.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, once I got out here, I was a little scared at times, because I didn't come, I had a little bit of money when I came out here, but really I launched my podcast. And by getting out here, though, Alan, it created this sense of urgency. And I said, okay, I'm here. I can't screw around anymore. I can't play this safe card that I was playing back in Maryland. I knew that I had to get out there and meet people, get around people that were going to hold me accountable. So I started attending things like meetups. I joined a Toastmasters club, and I really got involved. I knew that, for me to make it work, I was going to have to get myself in the right situations and meet the right people. And it's been a slow process. I mean, I've been out here now about 19 or 20 months. But some of the relationships that I've made out here have just been incredible, and has served me on a personal level and with my business as well.
Yeah. And then finally, the third one I want to touch on, which I think is maybe even the most important of all these, is the self-talk, the kind of the story you tell yourself. And so recognizing that we can tell ourselves that we can't do it and we're right. As a Ford quote that he says, whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right. You had an internal dialogue, a story that you were telling yourself, and then by kind of cutting the ties and getting out there, you put yourself in a situation where now you had to tell yourself a different story. It's like, I have to do this, or I have to do this.
Absolutely. Well, I think that negative self-talk is something that most human beings deal with on some level, and it's how we choose to react to that. So, I mean, one of the things that I was even doing in Maryland was putting the right type of content and information in my head, not choosing to watch the news, choosing to focus on personal development and positive podcasts. But the missing link for me was getting around those people that were going to encourage my dreams and challenge me, right? And that's one of the things that back home, I didn't feel challenged. I almost felt crazy for my way of thinking. Like there was something wrong for me for wanting to pursue certain things. So I think getting around those people and shifting your environment can inspire you and help you to tell yourself new stories. If you have people that are constantly in your ear telling you negative things, that's going to affect your mindset. It's going to affect your productivity and your output, right? But if you're around people that are constantly encouraging you, that's going to change some of those stories. And if you mix that with the right type of content and the right type of living space, it's going to do wonders.
Yeah. And that's why I tell a lot of people, it's like, personal trainers aren't for everybody. I mean, not everybody needs a personal trainer because they can pretty much do it on their own. But when you start really breaking it down, you want to look at those three things: is environment. If you're going to a gym on a pretty regular basis, you're in an environment where people are working to get themselves healthy and fit, and we're at all different health and fitness levels. So it's kind of a hodgepodge of saying, if you go to the right gym, you're going to basically be in an environment where the right things can happen. You're surrounding yourself with people, and with a personal trainer, you have some level of accountability. And then from that perspective, you have someone that's supporting your dreams, supporting your vision, and basically helping you build a self-talk of success. And so getting the right personal trainer, getting in the right environment, working on your health and fitness, I think those are kind of those big three that I would put out there to say you don't have to be afraid of being a better you. In fact, it's actually easier when you put yourself in the right position around the right people and have the right self-talk.
Yes, I think absolutely. You hit on all those things that are powerful. And obviously the health and fitness is a necessity, right? Getting around anyone, if you want to make a big change with your health, look at the people that you're hanging out with. Most of the time, if you were hanging out with healthy and fit people that value their health and their personal development, that is definitely going to create way more of a positive influence on you than if you're hanging out with people that are completely the other way.
So, as you kind of now have gotten over there and you've gotten to this place and you kind of have, I'm not going to say solved it, because obviously solving it is kind of a day-to-day for the rest of our lives kind of thing. But what's the next big thing for you? What are you challenging yourself to do? You have the successful podcast, and you have, kind of your new life there, and you're in a positive place. What's the next big thing?
Well, it's crazy. When I moved out here, my whole vision was I wanted to create this online business, right? Because I wanted to do everything online and virtually. And to tell you, to be honest with you, since I felt something has kind of been missing lately, and I feel like the missing link was I want more in-person connection. And I've done that with the networking and meeting people out here, but I want to bring that back into my business, something that I had before. And I was like, let me get away from this. But now I'm bringing it to light in a whole new way. And we're actually hosting unplugged retreats and helping people get away from the digital noise, connecting, really working on themselves mentally, physically, and spiritually, and doing so in an environment where, real connection can be held. So that is what's firing me up. We're actually hosting an event in Mexico in January, and just so excited about that. So between that, the podcast, and the coaching, I'm keeping myself pretty busy.
There is some irony in an online coach / podcaster doing an unplugged retreat.
Right. Absolutely, man. It's so true. But, I find myself, it's like, I love what the internet can do, right? It can connect us. So me and you can have conversations like we're having right now. But sometimes, I think it's good to just put the laptop away, put the phone on airplane mode, and really just get connected to the present moment. I'm big on meditation. That's one of these lifestyle habits that I really try to incorporate into my own life and with my clients. So, the retreat will be one of these things that I've had fear around, and another thing that I'm looking forward to kind of bringing into the world and making a reality.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's just a good thing. The reality is, if you're not unplugging from time to time, you're actually hurting your health, and 100%. You're hurting your longevity. So, this unplugged retreat, I think, is an awesome idea, and I know it's going to be successful because, well, that's just what you do, right?
Well, thank you, man. I look forward to hopefully making it successful, so I can come back and say, Alan, you were right, man. It was awesome.
Of course I am. Hey, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, wanted to learn more about your podcast, learn more about this unplugged retreat, where would you like for me to send them?
You can send them over to fearlessandhealthy.com. They can get, all the information about the podcast and what I'm up to. And also, if they want to do the Fearless and Healthy Challenge, they can go to fearlessandhealthy.com/challenge, and I actually will take them through some guided meditations. I know you're into the fitness stuff, but if they wanted to add that into the mix, they'd be able to do that as well.
Awesome. Well, I will make sure that those are in the show notes. So make sure you do check out the show notes at 40plusfitnesspodcast.com. Ian, thank you so much for being a part of 40 Plus Fitness.
Thank you for having me, Alan. It was a pleasure.
I want to thank you again for being a part of the 40 Plus Fitness podcast. Next time, we meet Dr. Dean Sherzai and discuss his book, The Alzheimer's Solution. Until then, have a happy and healthy week.